I've always been fascinated by ghost stories. The idea that something can remain after death, that emotions and experiences can leave an imprint on a place, it's both terrifying and intriguing. Tonight, I want to share with you a story that has stayed with me, a story that explores the darkest corners of the human experience and the chilling power of the supernatural. This is the story of The biting wind whipped across the desolate marshes, clawing at Arthur Kipps's coat as he urged his horse-drawn carriage forward. The landscape was a study in bleakness, a flat expanse of mud and reeds under a sky the color of lead. He was a young solicitor, sent to the remote village of Crythin Gifford to settle the affairs of the recently deceased Mrs. Alice Drablow. A simple enough task, he thought, a welcome break from the bustling London office. Little did he know, he was riding towards a nightmare that would forever haunt his waking hours. Crythin Gifford itself seemed to hold its breath, a village steeped in an unsettling quiet. The locals were reserved, their eyes holding a mixture of pity and fear when he mentioned Eel Marsh House, Mrs. Drablow's isolated residence. They spoke in hushed tones of strange occurrences, of a woman in black seen flitting through the mist, and of a pervasive sense of dread that clung to the house like the damp sea air. Kipps, a man of logic and reason, dismissed their tales as superstition, the product of isolated lives and overactive imaginations. His first glimpse of Eel Marsh House sent a shiver down his spine, a premonition of the horrors to come. It stood on a small island in the marsh, accessible only by a causeway that was submerged at high tide, a skeletal silhouette against the grim sky. The house itself was a decaying edifice of grey stone, its windows like vacant eyes staring out across the desolate landscape. A sense of profound isolation enveloped him, a feeling of being cut off from the world, trapped in a place where the veil between the living and the dead seemed perilously thin. He began his work, sorting through Mrs. Drablow's papers, trying to piece together the life of this reclusive woman. The documents revealed little, mostly mundane legal matters, but Kipps felt an unsettling undercurrent, a sense of something hidden, something unspoken. As the days passed, the atmosphere of the house grew heavier, the silence more oppressive. He started to hear things, faint rustling noises in the empty rooms, whispers carried on the wind, the unsettling sound of a rocking chair moving on its own. One afternoon, as the tide began to rise, trapping him on the island, Kipps experienced his first encounter with the woman in black. He was in the nursery, a room filled with decaying toys and the lingering scent of childhood, when he saw her. She was standing by the window, her face obscured by the shadows, her figure draped in black. He felt a sudden, bone-deep chill, a terror so profound that it paralyzed him. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his throat. The woman turned her head, and he caught a glimpse of her face, gaunt, pale, and filled with an unimaginable sorrow. Then, as quickly as she appeared, she vanished. Kipps, shaken to his core, tried to rationalize what he had seen. He told himself it was his imagination, a trick of the light, the product of his overwrought nerves. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had seen something that defied explanation, something that was not of this world. As he continued his work, the appearances of the woman in black became more frequent, each encounter more terrifying than the last. He would see her in the garden, standing amongst the overgrown weeds, her eyes fixed on him with a malevolent intensity. He would hear her crying in the night, a mournful sound that echoed through the empty halls. And always, she brought with her a feeling of intense cold, a chilling presence that seeped into his bones. Kipps began to research the history of Eel Marsh House, seeking to understand the mystery of the woman in black. He discovered that Mrs. Drablow had had a sister, Janet Humphrey, who had borne a child out of wedlock. The child had died tragically, a victim of a terrible accident, and Janet, consumed by grief and rage, had vowed revenge on anyone who crossed her path. She had become a vengeful spirit, forever bound to Eel Marsh House, seeking to inflict the same pain she had suffered on others. Kipps realized that the woman in black was not just a ghost, but a force of nature, a manifestation of pure, unadulterated grief and anger. She was not interested in haunting the house, she was interested in vengeance, and her vengeance was swift and merciless. Anyone who saw her was marked for death. He learned that the locals lived in constant fear of her, knowing that her appearance meant imminent tragedy. They had seen her claim many victims over the years, children mostly, their lives cut short by sudden and inexplicable accidents. Kipps understood now why they had been so reluctant to talk about her. They knew the danger she represented, and they knew that speaking her name could bring her attention. Kipps desperately tried to leave Crythin Gifford to escape the clutches of Eelmarsh House and the woman in black, but he was trapped, drawn back to the house by an unseen force. He knew that he had to confront her, to somehow appease her wrath, or he would never be free. He returned to Eelmarsh House, determined to face his fears. He went to the nursery, the place where he had first seen her, and waited. The tide was rising, cutting him off from the mainland, and the house was shrouded in an eerie silence. He could feel her presence, a coldness that permeated the room, a sense of impending doom. Suddenly, she appeared. She was standing by the window, her face no longer obscured by shadows. He could see her clearly now, her eyes filled with a burning hatred, her mouth twisted in a silent scream. He felt a wave of terror so intense that he thought his heart would stop. But then something unexpected happened. He looked at her, not with fear, but with pity. He saw the pain in her eyes, the depth of her sorrow. He understood her anger, her desire for revenge. And he felt a strange sense of compassion for this tormented soul. He spoke to her, not in words, but in his thoughts. He told her that he understood her pain, that he knew what she had suffered. He told her that he forgave her, and then she vanished. Kipps never saw the woman in black again. He left Crythin Gifford, forever changed by his experience. He had faced his fears, confronted the darkness that lurked in the shadows, and emerged, not unscathed, but alive. He carried the memory of the woman in black with him, a chilling reminder of the power of grief and the enduring nature of the human spirit. He had looked into the abyss, and he had survived. But the experience had left an indelible mark on his soul, a constant reminder of the thin